Welcome, everyone, to episode 59 of the RDH Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chad, joined alongside me by my brother Tanner. How's it hanging, dude?
It's good. It's good. We had first full week of NFL football. We're back. We're back in
Back.
business. We are officially, I'm kind of saying in the next part of the year, it's not as hot. It's getting a little bit colder. We're starting to see
Gotcha.
the little flurries around. Not any snow flurries, but some cold flurries, you know what I'm talking? So
It must be nice.
it's
Not in
nice.
Florida. Not
It's
even not even a little bit.
I mean,
It is a bit swampy down here at the moment.
yeah, I
But
feel like it doesn't change, I don't like when does it get cold in Florida?
there's like 2 months
Okay.
it's supposed to. I mean, hey, lived in California, now here in Florida. It's like they both kind of stay the same temp throughout the entire year, but California is about 20 degrees lower than Florida. Usually Cal's like 70 degrees. Here it's like 80 to 90, but hey, all you got to do is be outside for like 2 minutes, you sweat your ass off.
True.
There's your workout for the day. You know what I mean? So, I'm rocking with it. But anyway, we're a sports podcast. We don't talk about the weather that much. That was just for our weather fans out there.
Big
On
weather
deck
guy.
today, we just got to right. Like, wait, what? Um, that one guy's like, finally. On on deck today, we got a ton of football talk, like we always have. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can see the side panel. We got Dallas Cowboys. We got some NFL surprises. We got Week 2 predictions and some college football to talk about because we always end the episode with a little bit of college football. But we're going to kick it off and we're going to keep going with the Dallas Cowboys just like we did last week. I know we're a little bit late. We're not necessarily going to recap the game, but we're going to talk about going forward for the Cowboys. So, Tanner, briefly kind of go over what you saw with that game, not a whole in-depth, recap, and then what do you think Dallas has for the future? Because that week 1 matchup was a statement.
It was a huge statement, and I think that the point that I want to really get to is the offensive line. That was the big question coming into this matchup. What is Tyler Guyton going to do? What is Cooper Beebe going to do? You know what I mean? So
What a
that
name.
it I know, right? It's fun, but it
Oh,
against Miles
what a name.
Garrett and in that defensive line, which is pretty stout. I think they got a lot of pressure. I think Cleveland went in there.
I want to say one thing too to
Mm-hmm.
to hit your point home. Do you remember the very first play when the Cowboys had it on offense and Cleveland's defensive tackle absolutely blew up BB,
Mm-hmm.
and then the rest of the time nobody got past him?
No, yeah, and it was like smack in the face, and he's like, "All right, well, I guess this is just how it's gonna be." And then all right, after that, it was pretty fine. I
Yeah.
think, yeah, to your point, I think that interior pressure was pretty much nullified. I think for a lot of that game, you saw Zeke, Rico Dowdle. I think they were running pretty well. Considering everything that's gone down this offseason with the Cowboys running back room, they were getting some positive yardage. They were affecting the game pretty well. And like I said, with the offensive pass protection and stuff, it looked good. Dak looked, not, pretty comfortable, but I'd say that he was able to make throws. He was able to look at it and evaluate the situation much better than on the other side of the ball. You could say from Cleveland's perspective, that was, kind of a good comparison, I would say, at least in that single game. You saw Micah Parsons getting in the backfield what felt like every single time, with less than almost 2 seconds, not even to pass for Deshaun. So it looked like a very clean pocket when compared to that on the other side of the ball with the Cowboys. So looking towards the future, I'm loving it. I'm loving Tyler Guyton. I think he's plug and play. Cooper Beebe, plug and play. If they just continue to get reps and reps with this young offensive line, I think Cowboys are, starting to rebuild this thing, starting to get some young talent back on this line, and it's going to be great for the future. And, you have Zach Martin. He's an older player now, and he's going to lead these guys, I think, to victory. And he looked obviously good, future Hall of Famer. I think the big question mark that's kind of looming over people's heads is, Terrence Steele, is he going to continue to be, kind of this hit or miss player, or is he going to kind of start locking down now that the rest of the line is, continuing to look good, so I don't know. I'm positive that they played a good game and against a stout defense and defensive line. So that's pretty much the big point for me, especially in that matchup with Cleveland. There's a lot of things, but it just starts with getting the ball out of your hands, stuff like that. pressures were pretty bad from Cleveland's perspective. But, Cowboys looked like the team that we thought they would be coming into this year, and maybe even a little bit better. So not to mention too, actually, now that I think about it, Eric Kendricks, I think, had a really good game. And he was all over the field. And I didn't expect that coming out first game for him to just be the player that, I've seen him be his entire career. Sometimes they come to Dallas and they don't do a lot, so that's what we've seen in some situations in the past, and that's not it. I think this Zim defense, it looks good. He's got a lot of really good players, and he's knowing how to use them. So Dallas looks like they're reloaded and ready for 2024.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said. The thing, quickly hit on the game, because it's Thursday. I think the biggest question going into the game was the offensive line, like you said, and you made a great point. Everybody thought it was going to be the opposite way. Everybody thought that the Cleveland Browns were going to be in the backfield of the Cowboys the whole time, but it was the exact opposite. Micah Parsons is playing for a contract. You can tell. Like you can absolutely tell. I'm not saying that he wasn't as good as he was this Cleveland game in any other games. I mean, he's had better games in his career, but if I'm not mistaken, the dude had 5 pressures by the end of the first half, which I'm not really sure how that stat is kept, because every time I looked, like I felt like at least once a drive, minimum, if not twice, honestly, he was in the backfield every single time pressuring Deshaun Watson. Maybe, the stats created because, maybe another guy got there first, but I don't know, man. Like Micah Parsons is in a league of his own, and everybody knows it. And thank goodness that, he was like, I'm going to be a Dallas Cowboy for life, because every Dallas Cowboy fan, after signing Dak Prescott right before that game, it was like, oh my gosh, okay, so Mike is next. Okay, and we'll get into the Dak contract in a second. I'm just going to recap this game real quick. And on the offensive side, just like you said, CeeDee didn't miss a step. Missed a couple catches, but the thing about CeeDee is and it's early in the season. It's early in the season. Brandon Cooks looked great. Jalen Ferguson.
Wait.
It's hard to say how Jalen looked because
Jalen Tolbert?
No, Ferguson. Jalen Ferguson.
Oh, Jake Ferguson. Jake
Ferguson. I said Jalen. My bad. Jake Ferguson, the tight end for the Cowboys. He had Arusa Koromora on him the whole time, or one of the Cleveland Browns defensive backs, which are unbelievable. So the fact that he even caught some balls is really nice to see with him, because that's the safety blanket. You heard it. If every broadcaster that's a quarterback is like this, the tight end is the safety blanket for the quarterback, and they absolutely are. Last thing I'll say about the game is I was very surprised with how well Cooper Beebe and Tyler Guyton held up, because going against Myles Garrett, that's not a guy I thought they were going to have a ton of success from, but they did. And on to this week to the Saints for the Cowboys. Moving forward with the Cowboys, specifically the Dak Prescott contract, if you're a Cowboy fan and you've watched, I don't know, say since 2000, right? We'll throw you in the category with where I'm at. That's like 24 years of watching the Cowboys. In those 24 years, Dallas has had some brutal quarterbacks and about 2 good and depending on who you're talking to, Dallas is the most hated team on the planet. So if you say Dak's good or Romo's good, you'll get people coming at you from every angle. But guess what? They both are. And other than those 2, that's the only quarterbacks Dallas has had in the past 24 years. Every other quarterback that they've gotten has not even hit. It's been completely miss. And a lot of those quarterbacks were veterans that were brought over to the Cowboys that they paid for and then didn't do anything, just like Tanner was talking about earlier, how a lot of contracts don't necessarily hit for the Cowboys. But Dak made the largest salary, the biggest salary in the NFL, as the highest paid player in history now. If you look at the regular season numbers, it's, if I'm not mistaken, a little bit better than Patrick Mahomes. So if you're just looking regular season, it's like, okay, all right, that's a guy. You know what I mean? But before when Dak signed the last contract, we were doing the pod. It was Brad and I. It was Chad and Brad Talk Sports. But I said I feel bad for Dak because now he has to win playoff games. He didn't win playoff games. He didn't. And he signed a new contract. So the point I'm bringing it back to is, if you watch the Cowboys, Jerry pays one position no matter what, and it's quarterback. So if you were a Cowboy fan and watching the Cowboys as long as I have, you kind of knew it was coming. You knew Dak wasn't going anywhere. the highest paid player in the league was a bit of a shock to me. But at the same time, the market's going to go up every year like it has. So in a couple years, when Dak's done with that contract, I guarantee you he's not the highest paid player. He's not even probably going to be top 5 with quarterbacks. But what do you think about the contract? Because I get the regular season numbers, and I know that there's nobody better in that situation or in the situation right now for Dallas. Realistically, you can't say anybody coming out of college is going to rival those numbers right off the gate. How do you feel about the Dak Prescott signing?
It's tough because, like you said, it's a situation of you don't have anyone that's playing better, obviously for the Cowboys in his position, right? Like there's not someone you could go out and get that would play better than Dak. Unless you go and trade for someone. But that's such a weird kind of like way to go about it. The Cowboys are good. They got a good roster. They're probably not going to get a low pick in this upcoming draft. Stuff like that. You kind of have to, reach for straws at this point. And you're kind of reaching just period, if you try and go and get another quarterback. That being said, I think I don't necessarily, love it, but I don't hate it at either. I'm kind of like middle of the road. I'm same place as you are. Like, yeah, I expected it to happen. I think Jerry historically pays his players. He keeps it in house. We've always known this. Jason Garrett was here for way too long, and he was a quarterback for the Cowboys too. And so it's just one of those situations where like he has a good player on his roster, he's going to keep him there. If they're winning football games, he's going to keep him there. He's going to give him another chance. So it's been this song and dance with Tony Romo. I mean, he was a Cowboy for life. You know what I mean? So I don't see anything changing with Dak. I really don't. And Dak has given his all to this organization, and pretty much after Tony got hurt, he brought him up from the depths again, I would say, because, after Tony was gone, that was Dak. That was the season. That was the rookie season that everyone remembers. But
took a spot.
In terms of where to go from here, in terms of playoff games, in terms of what this means for him and his play, I think it means he's got to win some playoff games. Absolutely. That was, like you said, with the last contract, and now it's the same thing with this contract. He's just getting more shots at it. I don't, did he deserve it? I think it's a big question people are going on about. Maybe not, but I think this is just how the NFL works now. I think you see people getting the highest paid contract every single offseason. We see it. Three big time things that I remember was, I think it was last offseason or whatever, with Jalen Hurts. He got that big contract, and then they lose first round in the playoffs. And then, Trevor Lawrence, he gets a contract. It's like, okay, like, what have you done? Same thing with Jordan Love. He got paid, and it's like first season as a starter. So it's just one of those things like, yeah, he's making the most in the NFL, but to your point, it's not going to be like that. Probably next offseason, the one after that, But I will say the thing is, I don't love how many years it is for. It's only 4 years, I'm pretty sure. And so he's like 31 right now. He's playing out this year, and then the contract goes into effect next year, I think. So that's 5 more years of Dak, right? And then he'll be what, like, I think he's 31 right now. He'd be like 35, 36. So he's ready for that next contract, kind of like a Kirk Cousins, kind of like a Matthew Stafford. That's where he's going to be in his career whenever he gets that next contract. So I think this is the big one. This is the big one, the contract that's going to kind of make a point out of his career. If he doesn't do something during this contract, I realistically don't know if he stays after that. I don't know if he's going to continue to be a Cowboy. Obviously, it's far down the line, but it's uncertainty. We're pretty much in the exact same position that we were. I don't love it. I don't hate it. I just want to see results, and we're going to get more shots at it. What a better way to go out and absolutely destroy Cleveland in the season opener, he looked good. He didn't have to do much, and that's pretty much all you want to ask for your $60 million quarterback. I guess, you wanted to see him go 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, but it's week 1. He just got his receiver back. There's excuses, but team's good during the regular season. It's not, we're not questioning this now. We're going to be questioning this in January. You know what I mean? So it's middle of the road for me at this point. I don't know. We're just going to have to wait and see where this goes in terms of how he plays, what happens, Cowboys win the division, et cetera, et cetera. It's all based on results. That's the big thing is results. We know he's a good quarterback. Can he win in the playoffs? I don't know. We'll see.
So yeah, that's the big question, right? Is the playoffs, and why I brought that point up. In my opinion, he needed to win playoff games, and he did, and he still got a contract. So the thing is, is like you said, Dallas likes to pay their players, and the big thing with Dak Prescott is, once again, if you put his numbers up to anybody in the league, he's pretty much better in the regular season, which is that's not a homer take. Like that's legit. You can go look that up.
Mm-hmm.
And Dallas in the last 10 years has had the highest winning percentage out of any team in the regular season. It is in Dallas. It's not even close. But once again, it's the playoffs, right? It's the playoffs that matter. And there's been many legends that have not won playoff games. And I'm not ready to put Dak into that category yet. But by the end of his career, and you look at over time, I mean, what he's already broken with Dallas and what he's going to break and the records he's going to set. I mean, if he keeps up at this pace and doesn't get injured, he, statistically in the regular season is going to be the best quarterback the Dallas Cowboys have, and it's not going to be close.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for me, it's going to be really, really hard to ever beat out Troy Aikman, who won 3 Super Bowls, Roger Staubach, who won 2 Super Bowls. Like, it's going to be really hard to beat those guys out. For Troy at number 1, Roger at number 2, and then Dak comes in there at number 3, in my opinion, because he kind of, has done everything that Romo's done already. And so it's one of those. But the big thing is that, when is the last time Dallas has had this good of a defense? And it hasn't been since the 1990s. So the excuses are running out, and Dallas has had a good defense. When Romo was there, Dallas did not have a good defense at all.
Mm-hmm.
They got destroyed all the time. And if Romo wasn't putting up a 50 bill, I got my husky over here just sneezing up a storm, if you can hear it, by the way. And maybe bad idea to keep him in the room during the pod.
He likes to listen. He's a Cowboys fan.
He does. He's big Cowboys fan. His heels are straight up in the air right now too. But last thing I'll say about the Cowboys is that Dak, in my opinion, has solidified himself as a number 3 quarterback in the Dallas Cowboys. That's a bit of a hot take if you want to say it. If you go look at the quarterback list, you're going to be like, okay, not really. But he's already there.
Mm-hmm.
For him to jump to number 2, he has to win Super Bowls, not playoff games, Super Bowls. And Dak hasn't even got past the second game in the playoffs yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to need to see that, because every year that's the farthest that they get. And this year, I think, is an NFC championship or bust, because of all of the contracts and all of the staff that you have coming up. Now that Dak's there, now that CeeDee's there, Mike is going to be there in the offseason. Where do you go from there? Because if Zimmer keeps going the way he is with that defense, not bringing in a new defensive coordinator, and if they hire a new coach, he's probably going to keep Zimmer there because of how good he did. And that's only one game. We'll see. It's only one game. It's week 1.
That's Cleveland.
But exactly. That's my biggest point, throughout the season that I want to make is Mike McCarthy and the coaching staff, their contracts are up, aside from Zim. I think Zim's up too, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't 1 year.
Well, it's kind of hard, because if Dallas brings in a new coach, I know I just said that they're going to keep the defensive coordinator, but realistically, if it's a new young coach, he may bring in. You never know. You have no idea what they're going to do. It's very rare that they keep them, but hey, it happened with Mike McCarthy, and he kept Kellen Moore, and then he said, "Yeah, I'm good. Like you go ahead and go." You know what I mean? But we'll see what happens with the coaching staff. And I think for the coaching staff to stay, they got to go kind of deep in the playoffs. But at the same time, do you want Dak with another coach? Do you want the team learning another scheme? Mm-hmm. It's a lot of questions. No. And if Dallas gets bounced in the first round, I could see some changes.
Yeah.
If they make a little bit deeper of a run, who knows?
Yeah, and I think to your point, it's not just on Dak. I want to say that in the playoffs too, it's a team performance that they lost, and it's most of the time it usually is. I get it, they're going up against these really good teams, but Dak didn't have a good game this past season in the playoffs. We know that. But the defense didn't either. I don't know how many points they put up. It was a lot with the Green Bay Packers in a 7 seed, at home with the Dallas Cowboys. So if you have, supposedly this defense that's quote unquote, I'm not making fun of you or anything, but greatest since the 90s, like they should win these games and they should keep it close. They shouldn't be letting Jordan Love and the Packers coming in there and putting up, I don't know how many points it was, but a lot, and a lot of wide open receivers, just guys just completely getting out schemed and outmatched by the coaching staff, right? And that's kind of what you see year in and year out with these playoff games. It's like, oh, McCarthy got out coached again, big surprise. So I want to see more of that Mike Zimmer defense. I want it to develop through the season, and I want it to be good into the playoffs, into the postseason against these good opponents. I want them to be maulers at the defensive line, just get in the face of these big quarterbacks. These guys you're going to see, these Philadelphia Eagles, Jalen Hurts, you know what I mean, with Brock Purdy and the San Francisco 49ers. Those are the two juggernauts, and the Detroit Lions with Jared Goff. Get on there, like. I'd say their defensive line is coming together. We saw it with Cleveland, and Cleveland's got a pretty okay, and at least in that game, offensive line. So, and they dominated them. So they had a couple guys out too. Both their tackles were out, which is tough. But it's just you want to see that against the good teams. We know they can do it against these middle of the road teams, but you want to see them against the good teams because that's what's going to get you results in January, right? So I think it's a big thing about the defense, and I do think it also is a big thing with Dak too. Obviously his play can alter the course of the game, but if his defense is giving up a touchdown every single drive, like what do you want him to do?
Yeah, exactly. It's not college football, right?
Yeah.
You gotta stop the offense. All right, that's enough Dallas Cowboys talk for this week. Let's get to some surprises that I don't know if this is it is Thursday. It is a little late. But we're still going to talk about it. If you listen to the podcast, I'm a big Caleb Williams guy, and that debut, along with pretty much every single other quarterback aside from Michael Penix, who didn't play, nobody had a good debut. And the best debut out of all the rookies, in the between quarterbacks and wide receivers, specifically is who I'm talking about, was Malik Nabers. Malik Nabers didn't have that great of a game, but Marvin Harrison Jr. caught one pass. Bo Nix for the Denver Broncos. Well, if you watched that game, you probably turned it off. Drake May didn't play either for the Pats, but Pats somehow beat the freaking Bengals. Like, what the hell? We'll get there in a second. But Caleb Williams' debut. Everyone was freaking out a little bit. You know what I mean? Everyone was freaking out a little bit about the debut. It's justified because
chalk it up.
It was not good. Okay, they got the dub, they got lucky, but it was not a good debut. Now, is that take 1 week to get used to? It's the NFL. You don't know how long it takes these players to get used to. You have no clue, and not every year you're going to have a CJ Stroud. Mm-hmm. You can say that CJ is better in the NFL than he was in college, and that's hard to say. That there's a lot of players that's really, really hard to say for. So Caleb Williams, he didn't really have that great of a last season at USC. He didn't really have too much of a team around him, but he didn't have that great of a last season at the USC. He won the Heisman the season before. Now there's no excuses for this Bears team this year. Wait, there is. Did you see the offensive line? Did you see that pocket? Because, look, if you're playing a team and they're in the backfield the entire game, and this is the first NFL game the first regular season game that you've played, it's going to be way faster than it looks. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I'm going to say, I don't know if Caleb Williams had 10 clean pockets that entire game. That offensive line got beat to shit that game. I mean, that was such a bad ass whooping that I did not anticipate. Like, look, I know the guys on the offensive. I don't actually know them, but I've seen them and scouted them when they were coming in college. They're not that bad, but it did not translate very well with Caleb Williams. And you have so many weapons on that team, and I saw two completely missed touchdown passes. One of those touchdown passes was to Keenan Allen, and the pocket was clean, and the other one was DJ Moore, and the pocket was not clean. So I'm not ready to throw the panic meter up anywhere close to yet. Just like we said earlier, Trevor Lawrence got paid was arguably, if not the same exact recruiting level, and like the hype coming out was pretty similar. And you know, if you look at his regular season numbers and his playoff numbers, they're not necessarily the most impressive. But I don't know. To me, I'm a Trevor Lawrence guy. You know what I mean? I'm a Trevor Lawrence guy, and I'm still a Caleb Williams guy. So let's see what happens going forward with Caleb Williams. I need to see like 7-8 weeks of struggles for me to get anywhere close to the panic button. But game looked a lot, when he was that pocket was getting mauled like that USC UCLA game that you and I went to. Because like there was no clean pocket when we went to that USC game. You know what I mean? And you saw that when they were playing against him. But what did you have, Tanner, in the Caleb Williams debut? What did you see on your side?
I think you put it perfectly. I really do. And I think that to your point, especially with, there's not going to be a guy that's going to come out every single year and be CJ Stroud. I think in recent memory, the guys that I remember who came out and were, ballers, these guys just to come out and are just putting up rookie seasons that are, something you remember is obviously CJ, I think Dak in recent memory. And the only one that I can remember, and it would be like Big Ben, you know what I mean? In the time that I've been watching the NFL, so maybe Russell Wilson too. Like it's like that's it. Those are the guys you think of when you think of like great rookie seasons, and it's not necessarily a big deal breaker or anything like that. Like you said with Trevor Lawrence, his rookie season was overshadowed by some BS. You know what I mean? And he still made it work. He's getting better each year. So I love from what I saw from Caleb Williams. There were moments. There were moments when he stood in there, he stood in the pocket, and he made some really nice throws. And stuff
got nailed.
Yeah, and got nailed, and it looked really good. I was like, dang, that was step in confidence, in time, rhythm, and everything.
Tell me how similar it is to when Joe Burrow came in and not similar performance, but similarity in the offensive line. The dude had to run for his life.
He did.
And Caleb's doing the same.
He did, and multiple times in that game, you saw him kind of maneuver around the pocket and kind of make plays and kind of get the ball out of his hands without getting sacked. So I think, to his credit, I think he did a really good job in the pocket. When it came to actually throwing the ball, as a quarterback, maybe not the best, especially with those longer balls downfield, like you said with that missed one with Keenan Allen, just a wide open walk-in touchdown. But I will say, I think he should have had another touchdown that Keenan Allen did drop. That was a little out route to the side of the in the red zone that Keenan should have brought in. I think Caleb Williams should have a passing touchdown on that day.
Keenan makes that catch 10 times out of 10.
Yeah, so I think you kind of give and take with that situation too. And he's a rookie. It's his first NFL game. Like I said, I saw moments that I was like, this is why they drafted him. He's still raw.
Ooh.
Like it was kind of, on a day where the Bears defense and special teams were just absolutely annihilating the Titans. And maybe one of the funniest images I've ever seen with Will Levis just on his knees with his hands on his head after throwing that throwaway pick six.
That won the game.
There was a lot of things that won the game from that defensive perspective. Like that was rough, especially being down like 17-0.
How nasty is their number one corner?
They're good. Man. They're good.
Oh my God.
They're good.
He's so good.
Granted, there's not a whole lot in Tennessee that they got going. Sorry, D-Hop. Sorry, Calvin Ridley. But
oh, man, 70 million, dude. Come on, man. They let AJ Brown walk for like 20 million more. What are they doing?
Yeah, and he's playing in Super Bowls and going to Pro Bowls in Philly. But it's with Caleb, in terms of like, was he the worst, rookie quarterback debut? Or rookie debut period. I don't, maybe, probably, I would say. But like, we have been spoiled a little bit, like I said, with CJ Stroud in recent memory. So I think it's hard to compare him. I don't think it's a fair comparison, especially since CJ came out the gate throwing like 300 yards a game. So I like what I saw. In terms of the other rookies, Jaden Daniels, he had an okay start. I don't think rushing the ball for 16 attempts is a good idea if you're an NFL quarterback, though. And he's got to learn to sit in the pocket, pass a little bit more. But they put up
that's the big thing, right? That's the big thing with that type of quarterback, and specifically getting him. Like that's what he's gonna do. And can he develop into more of a passer than a runner? That's the big thing in the NFL. Can he?
It is, and that's the question. But how many times has it actually happened? This question has been posed many, many times with different guys coming out, and a lot of times it really doesn't work. A big example is Justin Fields. He is starting. I'll say that, but it's just he's a run first guy, and that's not what you want to see with your quarterback. Unless that's like the type of system you're running, but I don't know if Dan Quinn is going all first run. 16 attempts on the ground from this guy. It didn't. They put up score lines, they put up touchdowns. It was good, but I don't know if that's the recipes for success moving forward. But
Take it.
and anyways, I do want to shout out too with Brian Thomas Jr. I think the LSU wide receiver. He looked good. I think he caught a touchdown, like little toe drag. He played pretty well with Trevor Lawrence, and I expect him to be that kind of replacement for Calvin Ridley moving forward.
That was at the beginning.
Yeah.
That was at the beginning of the game. That was a nice catch and got him going really early. And then, you think about it and you're like, oh, that was like the second LSU wide receiver drafted.
I know. And you compare it over to like Marvin Harrison Jr. and Rome Odunze and, them not doing anything. But, just further to Trevor Lawrence, I think that was a good move getting rid of Calvin Ridley. I think that he's going to be just fine with Brian Thomas Jr. and Christian Kirk, who disappeared in week 1 as well. But yeah,
he had a bad drop. He had a bad drop.
He had a bad game. But it's week 1. I think that offense was down pretty bad this week, and defense just kind of took precedent. So,
how good were the Saints though?
Oh my gosh,
Derek Carr, you gotta chill out. You're playing Cowboys this week. You gotta chill out, man. And then here's my big thing though. Chris Olave, number 1 wide receiver, 1.9 points on fantasy. Come on, man.
Yeah.
1.9?
It was a weird fantasy week.
4 tugs? How are you gonna do that? How are you gonna do that, Derek Carr?
I know. It doesn't. I mean, when you got Rashid Shaheed balling, I guess it's a good problem to have.
Hey, I'll give it to you, fantasy experts. I'll give it to you. He was high on the list to draft. Him and Breece Hall. I was like, they're that high?
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? Hey, he's got the most 50-plus yard touchdowns or something, or tied for first, second, one of those two. Clearly, do my research.
He's
okay?
their home run guy. And, Derek, that's just Derek Carr in a nutshell. Like sometimes he just does something and sometimes he doesn't.
I gotta actually say it. There was a first-round wide receiver that had a way better showing than everybody, and it wasn't even close. Xavier Worthy from the University of Texas.
Of course. Yeah, and end of the first round.
God.
Yeah, definitely.
That was a player that when they took him, you went, oh shit. Like when you're another team, and same thing whenever Buffalo picks, because Buffalo seems to get these guys that you're like, how are they still there?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But you have the Chiefs that go and draft this guy, and then you're like, okay, they give him a jet sweep. Like, what's that going to do? Tug. Okay. Long ball down the field. He didn't only outrun that corner, he beat him. That was not even close. Like it looked like he kind of tripped on his feet a little bit at the line, and still got up and went. But when you have that breakaway speed, and when you break the NFL 40 combine record, all you got to do is put it together when it comes to catching that ball. And a player that had a combine record before was John Ross, and he could not put it together. He played for Cincinnati and had dimes, and couldn't put it together. But that's all I got on. Oh, you got more. Go ahead.
I got a question because I think we got to hit on this. I got 2 questions actually. But first, I'll start with the easy one. What did you see? I loved what I saw from the Detroit Lions on Sunday Night Football. Running the ball, being nasty, looking like the team that we thought that they would be coming into this season. Jameson Williams, give me your breakdown. Do you think he's going to be that guy moving forward, that number 2? Do you think he's going to get a better role? How do you think he's going to work with Amon-Ra St. Brown? Looking back on this team last year, it was pretty much the Amon-Ra show, and they had other receivers, I guess. Is this going to become the number 2 guy? Is he going to start to see like a, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith kind of role? Just a number 1-2 big bang punch.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think that is what they want him to be in Detroit. Now, he got in trouble for gambling. He got suspended for that. He also got injured last season as well for most of the season. So you saw very little of him actually play last season and the season before, but every other game it seemed like he got a long touchdown. And he's from Alabama, from the University of Alabama. I watched him so many times at the University of Alabama destroy A&M in person. I saw that dude just murk the Aggies. But here's the thing about JMO. He is speed, speed, speed. And my biggest question mark for him, any speed wide receiver coming into the NFL, is can they get off the line against press coverage with these nasty big corners? And can they catch the freaking ball under pressure? Not open, not clean, under pressure. He's proven that he can do that. You know what I mean? He's already proven that he can do that in the short time that he's played. If he stays on the field, if he stays healthy, I think this kid is easily a number 2 wide receiver and easily in the conversation with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, because we've seen what Amon-Ra can do. Amon-Ra didn't have that great of a game,
Nope.
The week 1, but we've seen what Amon-Ra can do.
Mm-hmm.
And if Amon-Ra is anywhere close to what he was, which he will be because he's young, and you have JMO in there going too. I mean, Jared Goff is placing that ball in places. When you saw that JMO touchdown, bro, that ball that he placed, it was like, dink, gone. Like, if you get him in stride, you're in huge trouble if you have this much space as a corner. And that's something that's really hard to cover and really hard to scheme for, because he can outrun safeties. So, like, that means the safety has to start even farther back in the field because of that threat of that pass. And then you can just hand the ball off. And, there's so many ways that a speedy wide receiver can just make your team go to the next level, especially if it's a successful one, as you've seen with the Miami Dolphins with Tyreek Hill. To answer your question, though, 100%, he's a number 2 wide receiver. 100%. At the end of this season, he's going to be the solidified number 2 wide receiver. And like I said, if he stays healthy, I think that it does go into that conversation in top 5, top 10 wide receiver cores in the league.
I like that. Yeah, I think with to your point, a lot of those speedy guys, and you see it all the time in Houston. You see it all the time in Kansas City with Xavier Worthy. Just the things that you can do with guys who are fast around the line of scrimmage. It's a lot of motion. It's a lot of stuff like that. And the Miami Dolphins made a killing off of it last year with just speed. So that's, I think, where the NFL is headed. And I think that the Detroit Lions have their own little gem, with Jameson Williams. But my next question too, this is the big one. Anthony Richardson, coming off a big injury last season, what is the expectation coming into this season? I think he's already met it. They don't expect him to, go out there and throw for 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, but he almost kind of looked like, their franchise quarterback that they thought they were going to get in week 1 against the Houston Texans, so like, he flat-footed throwing 60 yards down the field, like in the air. It looks really good. He's got an arm. Can he continue to do this? Is it a safe thing to do? He only completed, I think, like 9 passes, but he had like 200 something receiving yards. So, or passing yards. Like, what is the future for the Indianapolis Colts?
It's tough in that division because, in my opinion, I give the nod to 2 other quarterbacks in front of him. Mm-hmm. So DJ and the Texans run that division for the time being. And then after that, I do think the Jacksonville Jaguars are another team that if they can freaking close games, they can win. Because the Jags had that game won against Miami and gave it up. It's just that simple. If you watch that game, which, now I'm in Florida, I get all those games. It was so obvious that the Jaguars had that game won, and then they just literally gave it up at the end of that game. And the Dolphins, you can't do that against that high-powered of an offense when you have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. So where do the Indianapolis Colts go? In my opinion, this season, they're fighting for that second spot, and I think that's the best they're going to do. My thing with Anthony Richardson is it's kind of in the same vein of what I was just saying about, scrambling quarterbacks. You need to be able to find that pass. And yes, he did have over, 200 passing yards. He only completed like 9 of those passes. But the biggest thing is what I look at is rack, run after catch. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those passes that he threw was, it wasn't necessarily like a 40-yard dot and then he fell down. It was like, a small throw, 5 yards, and then 15, 20 down the field. So for me, I think Anthony Richardson needs to develop into more of a passer because he's already proven that he can run. If Anthony Richardson gets out in the open field, he can run. Now, like you said, you probably don't want your quarterback running 15 to 20 times a game because what happens? You get injured.
Mm-hmm.
Like exactly what happened with Anthony Richardson last year. He got injured. He's a big quarterback.
He's a big dude.
He initiates contact when he runs. He does not slide all the time. He initiates contact and tries to take down that one defender and get a couple extra yards and keep on going. Now, that's great if you're a running back, but when you're the franchise quarterback and someone that has to touch the ball every single play, someone that has to be in every single play, that's tough. So I think CJ Stroud, I think Trevor Lawrence, I think are more durable quarterbacks, have better offensive lines. Well, it's kind of tough with the Colts and the Jags. That's a toss-up. The Texans, I think, do have a better offensive line, mainly because the
crazy.
That's
crazy.
Bong ripping left tackle they got over there with Tunsil. Guy's a legend.
I think that like 4 years ago, we'd be saying that Indianapolis Colts look best offensive line, best young offensive line. They looked like they were going to be that offensive line for the future.
Yeah, I mean, and they have a couple guys that are solid. You know what I mean? I'm definitely not saying they don't. But like Quentin Nelson's their guy.
Level, yeah.
Yeah, the only one that has, in my opinion, is Quentin Nelson, and a couple other. We got to throw in a couple other names too. We'll do that in the future, but we won't bore you with the Indianapolis Colts offensive line. Everyone's like, "What are we doing, guys?" No, I think the Colts are going to be second or third in that division. I think it's CJ's division for the time being. I think you got to go in and beat CJ. Now, the Texans definitely looked a little bit vulnerable in week 1, but once again, CJ finds a way to win games. The Jacksonville Jaguars somehow find a way to lose games, and the Indianapolis Colts need to be closer in games so that they can get in a position to actually win games.
Mm-hmm.
Because the big thing about the Indianapolis Colts, man, is that I'm watching them and I'm watching their defense. And it seems like they either stop them on the first drive or it's a touchdown every time. Like it's one of those things. It's tough to watch their defense, but you never know. Teams can definitely turn around. Couple acquisitions, couple guys that haven't been signed yet are still out there, but I think their ceiling is going to be second place in this division. I don't think they're going to make it into the playoffs this year.
Okay, I like that a lot. It's a young team, and with Anthony Richardson, it is concerning. I think the thing that I remember the most with quarterbacks, these running quarterbacks, is not necessarily a run first guy, but I just remember Carson Wentz, that play on the goal line where he tries and makes the effort to get to the goal line, and that's it wasn't a season-ending injury, but it wasn't a career-ending injury. It was a season-ending injury, but it felt like a career-ending injury. Like
could argue
he did play after that, but at what level?
Exactly.
And that's what you don't want to happen to your quarterback, especially if he's this run first guy. And Carson Wentz, very kind of similar build, maybe not similar play style, but definitely, I don't know. I saw him rushing, going into the end zone.
I think
on week 1, and I was like, oh my gosh.
I think that Carson, yeah, like you said, is a bit smaller in stature. I would put the same body type as like Josh Allen.
100%.
Except he's got just like a little bit more meat on his bones. And you've seen what Josh does. Josh initiates contact, but Josh also is not injury prone. Mm-hmm. And when you go in the first year in the league and you get injured, that label is always going to be there because it's your first season in the NFL and that happened. You know what I mean? Because the game speeds up clearly. Now to say, is he a good young quarterback and someone that in a couple years with a couple drafts, a couple free agencies, that division talk could turn around? Absolutely. But only for second place. Because that's CJ, dude. I'm sorry.
I agree.
They addressed everything they needed to do in the offseason, and until they don't make the playoffs this year, which I do think they are, and they're going to win that division, then I'm going to just keep going with the Texans. And that's not a homer thing. It's just that's a good freaking football team.
Look at them.
Yeah. So definitely. Last thing we'll talk about in the surprises of the week, and then we're going to go to the matchups because we kind of got stuck on the Cowboys and the surprises of the week. But hey, that's okay. You got a little bit longer of a podcast this week, folks. Bengals, we already kind of hit on it a little bit. They struggled really, really hard coming out of the gate. Is that going to continue? I don't think so. I think they're going to be okay. And then lastly, we have to mention it because we talk about football. That Tyreek Hill incident, not a good look. Not a good look. They released the body footage or the body cam of it. If you haven't seen it already, you probably live under a rock. Just go YouTube it and you'll find it. My opinion on the matter, can't do that. you just can't do that. I understand that Tyreek had his window rolled up a little bit, but you can't rip a guy out of the car. That's just insane. Could not believe that I actually saw that. And it's so funny to me because it's like, how do you not know that's Tyreek Hill?
I know.
But at the same time, he did have a speeding ticket. And that if you have a speeding ticket, you don't pay your speeding ticket in a certain amount of time, you get taken to jail. So the fact that he didn't get taken to jail, but the internet was just undefeated because similar thing happened. I don't think he got thrown on the ground at all. Scotty Scheffler, the world's #1 golfer, he got arrested, I think, because he accidentally drove over something on the course. And then later on in the day, the footage comes out and the cop's like, hey, my bad for that, man. That there's not going to be a my bad for that in this situation with Tyreek Hill. But just brutal situation. You don't like to see it. And, we can move on to week 2 matchups if you don't have anything to say on that, Tanner.
No, I think it's interesting. You kind of with Tyreek Hill, it's like how do you not know it's Tyreek Hill? But at the same time, throwing him out of the car, putting a knee on his back on the ground, I don't just kind of look up to the right. You see a big banner with Tyreek Hill probably on it next to Hard Rock Stadium. Like, hey, isn't that guy? Oh shit. One of those kind of situations. I don't obviously wasn't there, obviously don't know the specific details about everything about it, but yeah, it happens. They're NFL players.
Brutal scene.
It is a brutal scene. They're NFL players and they still can do wrong in some situations, which is unfortunate, but I think both parties are to blame in that, and I think we should just absolutely move on and hopefully pay your speeding tickets, and don't pull people out of the car and put your knees on their backs. Just wrong in both parties, but with the
probably
Bengals,
not probably not a great idea.
It's not, but anyways, with the Bengals, I think the New England Patriots were in full effect. I think Ramondre Stevenson was full in effect. I think that he is their lead rusher, and Jacoby Brissett did not make a mistake. I think that was kind of the biggest surprise. Maybe not of the week. Well, I mean, maybe the week the Bengals going down week 1. There was a lot of surprises, but
I mean, they kicked the shit out of them. That wasn't even a close game. I turned it off because I was like, "This making me mad." And that's my fantasy team. Anakin Skyborough. Come on.
Yeah, I know. And you look at Jacoby Brissett, and historically what he's done. At least I remember when his time when he was in Cleveland. It wasn't like that. I saw him turn over the ball. I saw him make mistakes and try and win games and go out there and put the ball in bad places. But this is the complete opposite. Jacoby is looking good. I think he's not making mistakes. He's putting the ball in great places. He's being a great game manager, and he's putting his team in a position to win. And that's exactly what they did on a day that I think the run game was dominant. So if they know how to win football games. There's a simple formula that the New England Patriots are following, and that's, let our star players be our star players and not try and make Jacoby Brissett go out there and throw us, into this game and help him win this game. We're going to be a team game. We're going to get our stars involved and stuff. So I think a lot of credit you should give to the New England Patriots defense too. Like Christian Gonzalez had a hell of a day. He's balling out there. Not all the wide receivers were on the field for the entire time with that game with Cincinnati's offense. I think the combination of T. Higgins not being there and Jamar Chase being on snap count, inexperienced in training camp and stuff like that, lack of bigger training camp reps and stuff. It's week 1. They'll get over it, but the inexperience with the Cincinnati Bengals with kind of a receiving core / running back room that is almost completely different with Joe Mixon being gone too. So I think it's just a lot of
good.
He looked nasty. He got 30 rushes, dude. But I didn't think he could still do that. But what is the question? The big question mark, who's going to be that lead back for the Cincinnati Bengals? Is it going to be, I guess, I don't know, Chase Brown or I don't remember the other guy they have, but he was the lead guy. But how is that going to go moving forward? Is it? No, it's not Pirine. I think he's in KC. But it's the guy who was in Indy a couple years ago. Zach
Moss.
Zach Moss. There you go. But those are those two guys. Can they step up? We know Jamar's going to be just fine. T. Higgins, I want him to come back and be healthy and get some reps. I think you chalk that game up. Joe Burrow in week 1 is historically kind of bad, which for some reason, but I think they just got the better of them. It was a bad day for the Bengals, and moving forward they'll be fine. They play KC this week though, so that's going to be a big test. But
that's a good good afternoon game on Sunday. And
They play
that's
good.
the perfect segue.
Mhm.
That's perfect segue. I see what you're doing there. Week 2 NFL matchups. Tanner, we can't start there, but we're going to get to that game.
It's still a good segue.
That is a good segue. And we're dropping this, right before the game tonight because we know all of you are going to listen right game. We're so stoked. Bills versus Dolphins. Who do you got, dude? The Dolphins are favored. Now, given they're at home, but they're favored. Yes, the Dolphins are favored. So who do you got? Because whoever you go, I'm going the opposite team. I'll tell you right now.
It's going to be Buffalo because I don't I don't know if does Achane play? I already know Raheem Mostert's out. I know that they looked okay. They looked good against the Jags last week, but they didn't look great. I think that it was a close game.
They had that game lost until the they had that game lost, and then Tyreek did his thing.
But is that a defense that you're scared of? You know what I mean? In the Jacksonville Jaguars, I don't know if the Bills put up much more of a threat, but still, 20 points. I think Josh beats that easy. It's an in-division game. I don't know. I think Josh Allen has played this team enough times to know kind of how they work at this point. So I think it's going to be Buffalo. Even with Josh Allen with no number one wide receiver, we saw last game. It doesn't really matter. And the Cardinals put up a hell of a fight in that game too. And Josh just kept slinging it and slinging it and slinging it. And it was just going to the right place every time. Open guys. It looked like Buffalo didn't skip a step, so I think Josh is going to be good. As long as he plays the way that we know he can play up to his standards, I think Buffalo wins this game by a score, if not 2 scores.
Okay. All right. I just looked and Yahoo said that it's all for Achane to play. Cool. It's all up to a pregame warm up. No, I'm totally just joking. I'm not going to pick the Miami Dolphins. I think the Bills are going to take this one. Josh looked midseason form in week 1, and that's pretty scary. So I think the Bills are going to keep rolling, and I don't think that you can really necessarily say that the Miami defense did the best against the Jacksonville Jaguars, but at the same time, you never know what's going to happen. It's a night game. It is at home for Miami, but I'm going to go ahead and take the Bills on this one as well, and I think Josh is going to keep rolling. Now, the noon and/or 1 o'clock game if you're here on the East Coast. If you're on the West Coast, it's at like 10, which is I missed that.
Sorry.
No, like 12. But
you get thunderstorms instead.
It's happening right now. Cool. Saints versus the Cowboys. We talked at length about the Cowboys, so we're going to make this one very quick. The Saints were the highest scoring team last week. Do they continue that this week against the buzzsaw that is the Dallas Cowboys defense? We will see. In my opinion, I think Dallas has very good matchups against this New Orleans Saints team. I think that DeMar Overshawn, the linebacker for the Dallas Cowboys, has the speed in the middle of the linebacking core with Eric Kendricks there as well on the Dallas side. I think that Dallas has a bit of speed in that position that they necessarily haven't had in a while. And if you're telling me that Micah's not going to be in that backfield 10 times that game, I don't really think that's true. So I think Micah's going to go in there and do his thing. But I got the Cowboys again this week against the Saints, even though the Saints looked like the best team in that division last week, and it wasn't even close. But I think the Saints can put up at least 21, but in my opinion, I think you have to put up more than 3 touchdowns this game to beat the Saints. So yeah. I got Dallas, and I got at least 28 points from the Cowboys in this win.
Yeah, I'm going along the same lines, and I like the Overshawn shout. I think he did play a really good game last week, and kind of like that little unsung hero next to Eric Kendricks doing his job. And Marquise Bell got in there and did some good jobs too. But like that's a young linebacker core. That's a young second level to that defense. So we're gonna see how they do against this apparently sky high New Orleans Saints team. But I think they're gonna be dropped down to earth a little bit. And I just don't see that them having as much of a domination, especially against not the Carolina Panthers. There's an asterisk on that game a little bit, especially with Derek Brown, I think, being out for the year or two in that game. So they pretty much had nobody. And if you remember, Brian Burns is not on that team anymore. So there's not a whole lot that they can cling to over there in Carolina. But it's a little bit of the opposite coin over here in Dallas. We got a couple stars in that defense. So I don't see that them repeating that kind of performance, just because I think the interior defensive line has gotten a little bit better for the Dallas Cowboys, and the guys they brought in this offseason, they've lost a couple guys, but I thought they've brought in a bunch of big dudes that have really stopped the rush against that Cleveland offense, and that's a good rushing team. Cleveland's a good rushing team. I didn't care if they didn't have both their tackles. They're a good rushing team, and Dallas made them look silly. So, if you kind of make that Saints team one dimensional with Derek Carr, I think he's a little bit of not a little bit. I think he's definitely a step up over Deshaun Watson. I think if you pressure, get pressures on Derek Carr in the backfield, get him uncomfortable. I think he's going to force a couple turnovers. I think that team's going to easily put you in some situations where you can pick the ball off, you can force a fumble, and I think the Dallas's defense is ready for this game. I think Zim's going to get him going. It's an NFC team. He knows the Saints, so he's played them for I don't know how many years. So obviously give me the Dallas Cowboys. On the offensive side of the ball, there's not a whole lot from the Saints that scare me anymore, with the aging Honey Badger and in Marshawn Lattimore, who I really haven't heard his name in a while, so I think Cleveland's defense is a lot better than the Saints is currently, and Dak was just fine. They figured it out on the offensive line, and everything is, it's just a step down from here in terms of the defense, and pretty much at every single level. So I see Dallas, actually getting to run the ball a little bit better this game, and establishing the run, getting Zeke going. Maybe we see a little Dalvin Cook. He's looked good in practices and stuff. So give me Dallas. I think Dak is not going to lose this regular season game at home against the New Orleans Saints. I could be wrong, but even if it comes down to a couple drives towards the end, I think Dallas still edges them out with Brendan Aubrey. He's a great kicker. He's looked awesome. They just got to get in field goal range. They don't even, so with Dallas's defense playing as well as it is, you just got to take your opportunities when they're there. And, you don't, it's one of those situations. They should win. Will they? I think they will. So.
And moving on to the Sunday night game, Bengals and Chiefs. We briefly mentioned it earlier.
I don't think that's Sunday night.
Sunday afternoon. Thank you. Sunday afternoon. Forgot that there's a Thursday game in there. Hey, it's been a long day, right? It's been a long day.
Yeah.
We've got the Bengals and the Chiefs. Go ahead and start us off with this one.
What should be the Sunday night game, I would argue. I didn't realize that this was in the afternoon, but it's just this is a classic. This is like El Clasico, I feel, in the NFL now. We just got Joe Burrow and Mahomes going at it just, I feel like, every year, multiple times a year at this point. Like, what the heck's happening? But Joe Burrow plays well against the Chiefs. He does. Historically, he beats the Chiefs. And that's a good resume to have. That's a good thing to put on your resume. So it's tough because the Bengals look like doo-doo, this previous week, and the Chiefs didn't. And they're coming off two back-to-back Super Bowls. I'm going to go with the Chiefs just because I'm at this point in Patrick Mahomes' career, and I've said this 1,000 times, you have too, it's hard to pick against him, especially when he's playing, at the level he is. And I'd point to that I want to make is like, when Tyreek Hill left this Chiefs offense, all of us were wondering who's going to throw who's he going to throw the ball to? Who's Mahomes going to get this ball to? Well, guess what? It's Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice, and apparently Marquise Brown whenever he comes back, and a couple other guys that are just unsung heroes. And obviously Kelsey, but I'm in terms of receiving core. These guys look good. These guys look fast. It looks like KC has a receiving core now, and you should be afraid of them. So I don't think that's what the Bengals want to see, especially after getting just absolutely demolished by the New England Patriots. If they let Pacheco get going, this is going to be a long day for the Cincinnati Bengals because Pacheco is he's a game wrecker. He's going to go in there, he's going to break you, and he's going to beat you down, let Mahomes do whatever he wants in the passing game, and this game's going to be over before we know it. We're going to be turning off the TV, doing something else. So getting ready for Sunday night at that point. But give me the Chiefs, man. I think they just look too good. I think they've gotten better, and the Cincinnati Bengals looked pretty bad in week one, but it is Joe Burrow. I think it's going to be a close. I think it's going to come down to a one-score game. I don't know if it's going to be 3 or, upwards towards 7 and a touchdown, but definitely a one-score game. I can't say that the Bengals are going to get absolutely blitzed in this matchup just by the fact that Joe Burrow is a person and is on the Cincinnati Bengals, and Ja'Marr Chase also exists, and he's going to get more reps. He's probably going to play a full game. So give me the Chiefs, man, but give me the Chiefs by 6 point lead.
Okay, like I can get with that. I'm gonna, it's really hard, like you said, to bet against Patrick Mahomes, and especially with how good that defense was, or I mean, how good Baltimore's defense is, and what the Kansas City Chiefs did to them. I put Baltimore, in my opinion, top 5 in the league, especially with the playmakers that they have at the linebacking position.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna go Chiefs as well, and I think that Mahomes is gonna put that notch. Finally, taking out Burrow, but I do think the Bengals look like a better team. And then I do think that the Bengals go ahead and win in week 3 and probably in week 4, and they're back at 500. I don't think if the Cincinnati Bengals go 0-2, it's panic time because, like you said, their best receivers didn't really play last game. Yeah. So, I mean, Chase did a little bit, Higgins didn't. So, and they don't have Boyd. So it's like, it's tough, and they lost a lot of key people as well. The Bengals did. So I'm going to take the Chiefs in that one as well. And then here's the Sunday night game: is the Bears versus the Texans. So we got C.J. Stroud against Caleb Williams. Caleb looked not necessarily the best last week, and I do think that this is a pretty similar defense. Coming from with the Tennessee Titans that he played against, I think Tennessee Titans historically have always had a pretty solid defense, and I think the Texans know how to get after the quarterback with this defense. So you've shown that if you disrupt that pocket, pretty much any quarterback in the league is not going to be able to complete passes at the highest percentage. So I think if the Texans get in there and disrupt that pocket early, I think it's going to be a long day for the Bears. But I don't think the Bears go 2-0 on Sunday night. I got the Texans. I got C.J. Stroud in this one. Who do you got?
I think it's going to go Texans. I just don't think you can sit there and say that Caleb Williams is going to go out there and put up 3 touchdowns, 300 yards after his performance from last week. It's too, like you said, similar of a situation with the defense to make him actually do that. So I think the Houston Texans defense is a little bit better, even with the offseason acquisitions that they got with Danielle Hunter, and obviously Will Anderson Jr. is going to be just fine, and he's playing at a the level that he deserves and how the best level he's played at. So not to mention Derek Stingley and Jimmy Ward too. Like they're stacked on defense. So I'm gonna go Texans, man. I think Caleb. I think we're gonna finally see his first NFL touchdown. I'll say that.
I think he's gonna have a better game.
I think he will. I don't think it's gonna be nearly as rough, especially now that they kind of know what they're dealing with. So I think they're gonna try and get this ball out quick, though. I don't think you're gonna see Caleb Williams sit there and hold the ball for long periods of time like it was this past week, because he was like we said, he was maneuvering around the pocket. It looked really good, but that's it's all fun and games until you actually throw the ball, right? So quick passes. I think that's how they're gonna have success on Sunday night, and just get back to what he looked like at USC. These quick out routes, these routes that he can put on a dime, that it doesn't really matter how much time you have because the ball's out of your hand anyways. So I like the Texans. It's I can't pick against CJ Stroud, not right now. He's just too good, and this team is just not able to put up, I think, big enough of a fight for me to consider taking the Bears.
And last matchup, Monday night, Falcons versus the Eagles. Who do you got?
Go Eagles. Saquon is as advertised. I think
nasty.
He's disgusting, and this is the Philadelphia Eagles that I wanted to see last season. This is what the team that I wanted. Granted, I think Saquon's a little bit better than DeAndre Swift, but that offensive line is disgusting. That offensive line is nasty. I completely forgot they went out and got Mekhi Becton. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh my God. Oh my God. You look down the line, it's like, they're Pro Bowl, all of them, Pro Bowlers, arguably. So give me Philly, man. Atlanta looked horrible. Sorry, Kirk. They looked terrible. They got beat by Pittsburgh. No offense. Justin Fields, Pittsburgh. They didn't score a touchdown. Come on. How do you lose and you get Kyle Pitts a touchdown? That's what I want to know. How do you lose and you don't get Drake London the ball? So they looked good on paper coming into this season. The Atlanta Falcons, their defense, they got a bunch of big acquisitions. I think Jesse Bates is playing well. They went out and got Justin Simmons. Like that, it's like, dang, this is looking Matthew Judon. Like these guys, like, oh my gosh, AJ Terrell. Like this defense looks nasty, and then you get destroyed by Pittsburgh. I don't know. It leaves a bad taste in my mouth. So I don't know if unless Philly just drops an egg. I think Philly wins this by 2 scores, if not, maybe a little bit more. But even when they drop an egg, you saw them turn over the ball, I think twice in the first 2 drives, and they still won that game, so in week 1 against the Packers. So, man, just give me Philly. They're flying high right now.
I got Philly too. I don't think it's going to necessarily be that close of a game toward the end of it, but I think Kirk's going to get right. Kirk is coming off of injury, coming to a new team, but he's used to playing the Philadelphia Eagles.
That's fair.
So I'm going to go with the Eagles on this one, but I do think Kirk's definitely going to have way better of a game. I think Drake London may get himself a tug. We'll see how Kyle Pitts keep going, and what they need to do is somehow get Bijan going, but that Philly defensive line is nasty in the middle, so they're going to have to run it outside.
You saw Josh Jacobs get mauled, on Friday night, I think it was, and it's Josh Jacobs. That's a former rushing yards leader.
Yeah, and not long ago either. That is all the NFL talk we have this week. We're going to jump into just a little bit of college football to end out the episode here. The first thing I have to bring up, and this is how you know this podcast is not a homer podcast, Texas, the University of Texas. You go out and do what they did to Michigan. That was a very big statement. And that now they are not clear favorites because you still have Georgia. And honestly, Mizzou is just
kind of nasty.
I mean, where did that come from?
Is that why
you know what I mean? Yeah, I know. That's exactly. I know. I play NCAA, or sorry, EA Sports or EA. But yeah, dude, like you've got the SEC right now, given it's very early, and you got some teams that have fallen off a cliff, but you got a lot of top-heavy teams in the SEC, which is what you usually see. I mean, like we just mentioned, and that's not even mentioning Ole Miss. That's not mentioning Alabama. That's not mentioning where LSU could be at the end of the season. Not sure this is the year for Florida, but you never know, right? The University of Texas comes into the SEC and just unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable performance that they put up against Michigan. And I cannot wait to see this team week in and week out against SEC top-ranked opponents. And let's see what happens when the University of Texas starts to play these SEC-ranked opponents. But what do you think about the University of Texas? I mean, Quinn Ewers, goodness, that kid's going to get taken in the first round next year. For sure.
Texas is back, and I think that is clear. They were back at the end of last year, man, and it's Quinn Ewers is looking like a Heisman favorite right now. I think after his win over Michigan, he's looking just the best quarterback in college football, especially when you look at, Dillon Gabriel and how he was, kind of insignificant in his win this past week. So I think how do you say no to this team? They just went out and bludgeoned Michigan, and they made it look easy. They put in Arch Manning, and he was doing some fun stuff too. Like, I mean, I don't know if you saw that picture that came out on social media with I think it was the quarterback room for Texas, and you got Arch Manning going like this with the finger under his nose. You got Quinn Ewers with, I don't know, that thing on his head, and it looked fun. But it looked like a quarterback room that can compete, a quarterback room that we might look back on in 5 to 10 years and be like, dang.
He's a Manning.
I know.
He's a Manning.
And they got Quinn Ewers starting.
I know. And he's not even starting. That's how good this kid is.
I think you got to give that credit to Arch. He comes into that game and has a, I guess he has an impact, but he looked good when he did play in that game. So it was like, he's ready to go for the foreseeable future. And this is his challenge. He could have gone to other places. He could have started at other schools. Yeah. But he wanted Texas. He wanted the biggest stage in the NCAA in college football, and he wanted to bring Texas a title. So I think this Texas team is going to be good for the next couple years, if not the next 3 to 4 to 5 years. So look at them; they look really good. There's nothing bad that you can say about them.
And the interesting part is that with Arch specifically, this is technically going to be his second season already. Mm-hmm. So he's going to his junior season. You could realistically see Arch Manning playing one season like a lot of these quarterbacks did and just going straight into the NFL. But we'll see. Quinn Ewers, real deal. Arch is going to be there next year because Quinn's leaving after this year. So Texas is good, but they got a lot of key opponents that are coming up and high-ranked SEC opponents. So we'll see what happens there. Notre Dame, losing to NIU, that's a bad look for the Aggies. That's
That's
a
tough.
real tough look for the Aggies. But have to shout out NIU. You know what I mean? That was one hell of a game. I know it happened a little bit ago, but that was a hell of a game. Nobody saw that coming. And when you pay a school and that school beats you, that's freaking embarrassing.
It's very embarrassing.
But it's one of those things where it happens every single year, and that I cannot believe it happened already. And I'm very glad that I got to watch that game. But NIU, I mean, hats off, shout out to NIU. What a freaking football team that
Oh yeah.
that they have.
And I mean, it's a new look Notre Dame offense. Sam Hartman going to the NFL, like that is it's gonna be different. You know what I mean? It's gonna be you're gonna have some growing pains. I didn't think they'd be this large, but especially considering their defense is arguably a top 5 defense unit in the country, if not number 1 or 2. Like
They have a couple first rounders.
this defense is disgusting, and you would expect them to keep them in games, and they did for the most part. But when you only put up 14 points, like what do you want the defense to do? So they're on the field pretty much the entire game. And the Notre Dame offense was you couldn't they didn't look like they were there. It's like they just didn't show up that week. So not a good look for Notre Dame. Not a good look for Texas A&M. And I mean, the Notre Dame team I think is a little bit worse than we initially thought. And that I don't know how Iowa suddenly got an offense and Notre Dame suddenly lost it, but it looks like they just kind of switched places. So maybe this is the new Iowa of college football in the Fighting Irish.
Yeah, and then the last team you wanted to bring them up. Tell us about the University of Oregon and what you're seeing there, and then we'll end this thing.
I think you got to give Boise State a lot of credit. I think their quarterback went out and balled. I think that that young kid that they got over there in Boise State, he's looking good. Had like the first week he had like 6 touchdowns. That's gonna be a future NFL running back, future NFL star right there. I think that he put on the brightest stage, I think, for Boise State probably this season. I don't know their schedule, but Oregon's a pretty big team, and he went out there and he hooped. He didn't just ball, he hooped. So you got to give a lot of credit to the Boise State offense just in general. I think their quarterback played very well, and Dylan Gabriel, I think that he had moments that he looked pretty good. Evan Stewart looked good in that game. Pretty much, come from Texas A&M. It's a guy, that Aggies want to see succeed and continue to be the player that we know he is. He looked as advertised. So the thing about the game though is like Boise State probably should have won that game, which is kind of crazy because it's Oregon and they're this high flying team. There's high powered offense, but I mean Oregon, they run back a punt return and I think a kick return in the same game. Which just huge blow to Boise State. That's 14 points. That is just on a day where Boise State looked like the better team, I think hands down. It's kind of crazy that they managed to pull that out. I want to see more from Oregon. I'm going to continue to be watching those games because they're such an interesting team. And week 1, they barely snuck out a win too. So it's like, oh my gosh, like what's going on here? So they're supposed to be, potentially national title, hopefuls. So, it's a little bit concerning, I'll say, if you are an Oregon fan, considering these games have been a lot closer than they probably should have been.
Close, little too close for comfort. Last thing I'm going to say on the pod is shout out James from the Fantasy League. Saw you changed your team name to Darth Hall.
Dude, that's sick. Sick.
Well played, sir.
I think Logan also changed his to Smith Lord. Devontae Smith. So we got
shout out Logan.
We got the whole
shout out Logan. Shout out James. Y'all are awesome.
We got the.
All right, folks. We'll talk at you next week.
Goodbye, everyone.